Explore Poirot's Casebook Audio, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot cracks cases in immersive audio stories. In the shadowed halls of Blackthorn Manor, a scream pierces the night, and a loyal groom lies dead in the stables, his blood staining the straw. Who wielded the fatal blow? Was it the fiery horse trainer with a hidden grudge, the nervous lady with secrets of debt, or the sharp-witted niece guarding a family legacy? As Hercule Poirot unravels a web of greed, betrayal, and forbidden love, a shadowy horse dealer lurks in the background, pulling strings. Can Poirot's little gray cells uncover the truth before another life is lost? Step into a classic mystery where every clue counts, and the Diomedes horses hold the key to a shocking revelation. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Blackthorn Manor. The late summer sun cast a golden haze over the rolling hills of Devon, where Blackthorn Manor stood like a sentinel of a bygone era. Its ivy-clad walls and towering chimneys loomed against the horizon, a testament to the wealth and prestige of the Haverford family. The estate, nestled in a secluded valley, was a world unto itself, its sprawling grounds encircled by dense woods and a single winding road that connected it to the outside world. To Captain Arthur Hastings, the sight was both enchanting and faintly ominous, as though the manor held secrets in its very stones. Hastings adjusted his tie as the motor car rattled along the gravel drive, the engine's hum mingling with the distant whinny of horses from the estate's renowned stables. He had been invited to Blackthorn Manor by Sir Reginald Haverford, a baronet whose passion for equine breeding was matched only by his reputation for hospitality. The invitation, penned in Sir Reginald's precise hand, had promised a weekend of fine company, spirited conversation, and a chance to inspect his prized Diomedes horses, a breed said to descend from ancient stock, famed for their strength and fiery temperament. It is most kind of Sir Reginald. Furnishings. The room was a study in contrasts, elegance marred by tension. Sir Reginald, a robust man in his late 50s, with a ruddy complexion and a mane of silver hair, stood by the mantelpiece, his laughter booming as he recounted a tale of a recent horse race. His wife, Lady Beatrice, sat poised on a velvet settee, her delicate features betraying a nervous flicker in her eyes. She toyed with a string of pearls, her gaze darting toward the door as though expecting an unwelcome arrival. Nearby, Miss Clara Haverford, Sir Reginald's niece, lounged with a book, her auburn curls catching the firelight. She was a striking young woman, her sharp wit evident in the occasional barbed comment she tossed into the conversation. Beside her sat Dr. Edmund Vance, a local physician with a quiet demeanor and a habit of adjusting his spectacles when addressed. His presence seemed to anchor the room, though his eyes held a guarded quality. The final guest, Mr. Lionel Gray, a horse trainer of some repute, stood apart, his lean frame silhouetted against a window. His hands, rough from years of work, fidgeted with a cigarette case, and his expression was one of barely concealed impatience. Hastings noted the man's restless energy, as though he were a thoroughbred straining at the bit. "Captain Hastings!" Sir Reginald's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. "Delighted you could join us. Come, let me introduce you." He gestured expansively, his bonhomie masking a certain strain in his posture. "My wife, Lady Beatrice, my niece Clara, Dr. Vance and Mr. Gray, who keeps my stables in order." Hastings bowed politely, exchanging pleasantries. though he could not shake the sense that each smile was a mask. Lady Beatrice's greeting was warm but brittle, Reginald said, though his smile was tight. They require a firm hand. Like people, eh, Gray? The trainer's jaw tightened and he said nothing, his gaze fixed on his plate. Hastings made a mental note of the exchange, sensing a rift beneath the surface. As dessert was served, a distant sound broke the silence, a sharp, piercing scream from the direction of the stables. The guests froze, forks poised mid-air. Sir Reginald's face drained of color, and Lady Beatrice's hand flew to her throat. "Good heavens, what was that?" Dr. Vance said, rising from his chair. "Likely one of the horses," Gray said, though his voice lacked conviction. He stood abruptly. "I'll check." "No, no," Sir Reginald said, his tone commanding. "We'll all go. No need for alarm, but let's be certain." The party moved as one, hastening through the manor's rear doors and across the dew-damp lawn toward the stables. The night was cool, the air heavy with the scent of hay and leather. Lanterns cast flickering light across the cobblestones, revealing a scene of chaos. A stable door hung ajar, and inside a magnificent black stallion reared, its eyes wild with panic. But it was not the horse that drew a gasp from Lady Beatrice. On the straw-covered floor, illuminated by the lantern's glow, lay a figure, motionless, a dark stain spreading beneath it. Dr. Vance knelt beside the body, his fingers searching for a pulse. He looked up, his face grim. "It's Tom Ellis, the head groom," he said. "He's dead." A murmur of shock rippled through the group. Hastings's heart raced, his mind already turning to the details, the time, the scream, the expressions of those around him. This was no accident, he thought. And somewhere, in the shadows of Blackthorn Manor, a murderer lurked. Chapter 2. The Shadow of Murder. The stable was a cavern of must disturb nothing until they arrive. The scene must remain untouched. Hastings nodded, though his thoughts were already racing. Tom Ellis, the head groom, had been a robust man, broad-shouldered and weathered by years of labor. The wound suggested a brutal blow, delivered with force. A blunt instrument, perhaps, or something heavier, a tool from the stable. His eyes scanned the surroundings. A pitchfork leaned against a wall, a shovel rested in a corner, and a heavy iron horseshoe hung on a hook. Any could have been the weapon, but none bore obvious signs of blood. "Who found him?" Hastings asked, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "I did," Gray said abruptly, halting his pacing. "I heard the scream, same as you all. Came out to check the horses, thought one might have broken loose. Found him like this." "You were alone?" Hastings pressed, noting the trainer's defensive posture. Gray's eyes narrowed. "Aye, the others were still at dinner. I didn't wait for company to do my job." "Quite so," Sir Reginald interjected, his tone sharp. "Gray's always first to the stables when there's trouble." "No need to imply otherwise." Captain Hastings raised a placating hand. "Merely establishing the facts, Sir Reginald. The police will ask these questions, and it's best we're clear." Clara's gaze flicked to Hastings, a spark of curiosity in her eyes. "You sound like a detective yourself, Captain. Have you experience in such matters?" Hastings hesitated, a faint flush rising to his cheeks. "I've assisted a friend in similar situations. A man of remarkable insight. In fact, I've asked him to join us here. Hercule Poirot should arrive tomorrow." "Poirot?" Lady Beatrice's voice was faint, her fingers tightening on her pearls. The Belgian detective? His heavy oak desk held a telephone. As he dialed, Hastings took the opportunity to observe the others. Lady Beatrice sat in a high-backed chair, her composure fraying. She twisted a handkerchief, her eyes darting to the window as though expecting to see the murderer lurking in the darkness. Clara, by contrast, stood by the fireplace, her expression unreadable, but her posture alert, as if she were piecing together a puzzle of her own. Sir Reginald's voice, steady but strained, relayed the grim news to the local constable. "They'll be here within the hour," he said, hanging up the receiver. A ghastly business. Tom was with us for years, loyal, dependable. Who could do such a thing? Someone with a reason, Clara said softly, her words cutting through the room like a blade. Tom wasn't the sort to make enemies, but no one's without secrets. Her uncle shot her a sharp look. "Clara, this is no time for speculation, isn't it?" she replied, her tone cool. "Someone struck him down in cold blood. That's not an accident." Uncle Hastings watched the exchange, his mind cataloging the undercurrents. Clara's boldness suggested she knew more than she let on, while Sir Reginald's defensiveness hinted at a desire to maintain control. Lady Beatrice's silence was equally telling. Her fear seemed to stem from more than the shock of death. As they waited for the police, Hastings stepped to the window, gazing toward the stables. The lantern light still glowed faintly, marking the spot where Tom Ellis lay. He thought of Poirot, picturing his friend's meticulous habits, how he would stroke his mustache, his eyes gleaming as he unraveled the threads of human nature. This was precisely the sort of case Poirot relished. A closed circle, a web of motives, and a truth buried beneath layers of deception. A clock on the mantel struck 10:30, its chimes echoing like a warning. Drive was Hercule Poirot. His small, immaculate figure was unmistakable, the patent leather shoes gleaming despite the damp, the neatly tailored coat, and the unmistakable mustache waxed to perfection. His green eyes sparkled with curiosity as he surveyed the manor, as though it were a chessboard on which he would soon play a masterful game. "Hastings, mon ami," Poirot exclaimed, his voice warm but tinged with the gravity of the occasion. "You have summoned me to a most intriguing scene, n'est-ce pas? A murder in a grand English manor. It is like a novel of Madame Christie herself." Hastings managed a wry smile, shaking his friend's hand. "I'm glad you're here, Poirot. It's a nasty business. The head groom, Tom Ellis, was found dead in the stables last night. A blow to the head, and no clear culprit." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his head tilting slightly. "A blow to the head, you say? And in the stables, where these famous Diomedes horses reside? Most curious. Tell me, Hastings, what is the mood of the household?" "Strained," Hastings replied, leading Poirot into the hall. "Everyone's on edge. Sir Reginald, the owner, is trying to keep up appearances, but his wife, Lady Beatrice, seems terrified. Their niece, Clara, is sharp as a tack and not afraid to speak her mind. Then there's Dr. Vance, the local physician, and Lionel Gray, the horse trainer. They all claim to have been at dinner when the scream was heard, but you suspect otherwise," Poirot finished, his tone approving. "Good, Hastings. You begin to think like Poirot. Now, introduce me to this cast of characters, and let us see what lies beneath their polished exteriors." They found the household gathered in the morning room, where a fire did little to dispel the chill of unease. Sir Reginald stood by the window, his hands clasped, revealed. "But I must ask questions, and I must observe. May I have your permission to speak with everyone in the household? Of course, Sir Reginald said, though his voice held a note of reluctance. Anything to get to the bottom of this. Poirot inclined his head, then turned to the room. Bon, let us begin with the simple facts. Last night, at what time was the scream heard? 9 o'clock or thereabouts, Clara said promptly, her eyes meeting Poirot's with a hint of challenge. We were just finishing dinner. And you were all present? Poirot asked, his tone deceptively mild. All but Gray, Dr. Vance said, adjusting his spectacles. He left to check the stables after the scream. Left alone, you say? Poirot's mustache twitched. And what did you find, Mr. Gray, when you arrived? Gray had entered the room unnoticed, his boots still dusted with straw. He leaned against the doorframe, his expression guarded. Tom. Dead. The black stallion, Diomedes, was rearing like the devil himself. I calmed the horse and raised the alarm. Poirot nodded slowly, as though filing the information in a mental ledger. And the weapon? The police. They have found it? Not yet, Sir Reginald said. They searched the stables but found nothing conclusive. A blunt object, they think. A tool, perhaps. Perhaps, Poirot murmured, his eyes drifting to the window, where the stables were just visible through the mist. Tell me, Sir Reginald, these Diomedes horses, they are valuable, we? Immensely, Sir Reginald replied, pride creeping into his voice. Descended from ancient stock, bred for strength and spirit. Tom knew their worth better than anyone. And their tempers? Poirot asked, his tone light but probing. They can be difficult. Beatrice is hiding something. Sir Reginald's trying to keep control, but he's rattled. Précisément, Poirot said, pausing at the stable door. The police tape had been removed, but the scene remained much as it was. Straw scattered, a bucket overturned, and a faint stain where Tom Ellis had fallen. Poirot knelt, examining the ground with the care of a jeweler inspecting a gem. Look, Hastings, he said, pointing to a small muddy footprint near the stall. It is fresh, and it is not the heavy tread of a groom. A woman's shoe, perhaps? And here, he gestured to a splintered beam, where a faint smear of blood lingered. The weapon was heavy, but not sharp. A horseshoe, perhaps, or a tool. But why leave it behind? Hastings frowned. You think the killer took it? Or hid it, Poirot said, rising. This was no crime of passion, Hastings. It was planned, precise. And the scream. Why did it come at 9 o'clock when all were at dinner? A distraction, perhaps, or a miscalculation. As they returned to the manor, the mist began to lift, revealing the stark beauty of Blackthorn's grounds. But to Hastings, the estate felt more like a cage, its occupants bound by secrets only Poirot could unravel. Chapter 4. The questions begin. The morning room of Blackthorn Manor, with its high ceilings and heavy velvet curtains, seemed to close in on its occupants as Hercule Poirot began his interviews. The air was thick with the scent of polished wood and the faint bitterness of cooling tea, but the atmosphere was charged with unspoken tension. Poirot sat in a high-backed chair, his small hands folded neatly in his lap, his green eyes moving from one face to another with the precision of a metronome. Captain Hastings stood by the window, observing both his friend and the assembled company, noting every flicker of replied, his tone firm but edged with impatience. We all were, save Gray. Dinner began at 8, and we were well into the main course when the scream came. Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching slightly. And the stables. They are not far from the house. A scream would carry, but to hear it so clearly, it suggests the door to the dining room was open, perhaps. Sir Reginald hesitated, then nodded. The French doors to the terrace were ajar. It was a warm evening, and Beatrice likes fresh air. Most interesting, Poirot murmured, making a mental note. He dismissed Sir Reginald with a polite smile and turned to Lady Beatrice, who entered with the hesitancy of a deer stepping into a clearing. Her delicate hands twisted a lace handkerchief, and her eyes darted nervously to the door. "Madame," Poirot said gently, "you are distressed, and it is natural. But I must ask you to recall the events of last night. You were at dinner, oui? Did you notice anything unusual before the scream?" Lady Beatrice swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing. Nothing specific, Monsieur Poirot. We were talking, laughing even. Then the scream. It was so sudden, so awful. I thought it was one of the horses at first. And Tom Ellis," Poirot pressed, his tone still soft but insistent. "Did he ever speak to you of troubles? A disagreement, perhaps, with someone in the household?" Her eyes widened and she shook her head quickly. "No, no. Tom was always respectful. He kept to himself mostly. His work was with the horses, not us." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, noting the tremor in her hands. "Merci, madame. You have been most helpful." But as she left, Hastings caught the flicker of doubt in Poirot's expression. Next came Clara Haverford, who strode into the room with a confident, "You at, say, 8:45? Clara's lips curved into a faint smile. "At the table, Monsieur Poirot. I don't make a habit of wandering the grounds at night." "Bien," Poirot said, dismissing her with a nod. As she left, he turned to Hastings, his voice low. "She is clever, that one. She sees much, but she reveals little. We must watch her closely." Dr. Vance was next, his demeanor calm but guarded. He adjusted his spectacles as he sat, his answers precise but unembellished. He confirmed the timeline, dinner at 8, the scream at 9, and his role in examining the body. "The wound was severe," he said, his voice clinical. "A single blow, delivered with force. Death was likely instantaneous." "And you saw nothing suspicious before the scream?" Poirot asked. "Nothing," Dr. Vance replied. "I was focused on my meal, though I recall Gray seemed restless. He kept glancing at his watch." Finally, Lionel Gray entered, his lean frame taut with suppressed energy. His answers were curt, his tone defensive. "I was at dinner until the scream," he said. "Went straight to the stables and found Tom. That's all there is to it." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet, Monsieur Gray, you are a man who knows these horses. Could one of them have caused this tragedy? A kick, perhaps?" Gray's jaw tightened. "Diomedes is wild, but Tom knew how to handle him. No horse did this. It was a man's work." As Gray left, Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Hastings, mon ami, the alibis. They are too perfect, too aligned. Everyone was at dinner, yet the scream was heard by all. The French doors were open, the stables close, and this footprint in the mud. A woman's shoe, perhaps, but whose? We have a puzzle, and the pieces, they are beginning to form." Lunch. Grayson, with his clipped mustache and brisk manner, had taken one look at the stable scene and declared Lionel Gray the most likely suspect. He was the first to find the body, the inspector had said, his voice carrying across the hall. And he's got the build for it. A man used to handling wild horses could easily swing a heavy blow. Hastings had bristled at the inspector's haste, but Poirot had merely smiled, his eyes gleaming with that quiet amusement that signaled he was already several steps ahead. Now, as the household went about its strained routines, Poirot had requested a moment to confer with Hastings in the library, away from prying ears. "Hastings, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low. "This Inspector Grayson, he is like a hound chasing the most obvious scent. He sees M. Gray's presence at the stables and assumes guilt. But the truth, it is not so simple. The red herring, it is placed before us deliberately, no? You think Gray's innocent?" Hastings asked, closing the book with a soft thud. "He's certainly defensive, and he was alone when he found Ellis." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Innocent or guilty, that remains to be seen. But consider, Hastings, if Monsieur Gray is the murderer, why draw attention with his scream? Why not slip away quietly? No, there is something else at play. We must look beyond the obvious." Before Hastings could respond, a soft knock interrupted them. Clara Haverford entered, her expression a mix of curiosity and defiance. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice crisp. "I couldn't help overhearing the inspector. He's got it in for Gray, hasn't he?" Poirot inclined his head, gesturing for her to sit. "Mademoiselle, you are perceptive. The inspector, he favors the simple solution. But you, I think, see more. Tell me, mademoiselle, your candor is most helpful." As Clara left, Hastings turned to Poirot. "She's pointing the finger at Gray, but subtly. Do you think she's trying to steer us?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, tapping his pen against the notebook. "But her words, they reveal as much about her as about Mr. Gray. She observes, she judges, but she guards her own secrets. We must keep her in mind." Their conversation was cut short by the arrival of Inspector Grayson, who strode into the library with a purposeful air. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said. "We found something in the stables. You'd better come see." The trio crossed the lawn to the stables, where the air was still heavy with the scent of hay and blood. The constable stood by a stall holding a heavy iron horseshoe, its surface smeared with a dark stain. "Found it tucked behind a bale of hay," the constable said. "Looks like blood, sir." Grayson's eyes gleamed with triumph. "Gray's prints are all over this place. If this is the weapon, we've got him." Poirot examined the horseshoe, his gloved fingers tracing its edges. "It is indeed heavy enough to kill," he said softly. "But tell me, Inspector, why hide it so poorly? A man as clever as Mr. Gray, would he leave such evidence where it could be found?" Grayson frowned, clearly unused to having his conclusions questioned. "He might have panicked. Killers often do." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone non-committal. He turned to the stall, his eyes scanning the straw-covered floor. "And yet, this horseshoe, it is from the black stallion, Diomedes, oui?" The constable nodded. "Aye, sir." "It's one of his. Must have come loose." Poirot's gaze lingered on the stall where the stallion snorted softly, its eyes wary. A horse that trusted Tom Ellis, yet now it is without a shoe. Its chimes echoing like a warning. The net was tightening, but the true killer remained elusive, cloaked in the shadows of Blackthorn's secrets. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The afternoon sun cast dappled shadows across the manicured lawns of Blackthorn Manor, but within its walls, the atmosphere remained heavy with suspicion. Hercule Poirot, his small frame erect and his eyes alight with purpose, had retreated to the library to ponder the morning's discoveries. Captain Hastings followed, noting the detective's familiar habit of pacing in a precise, measured rhythm, as though each step aligned with the turning of his little gray cells. "Hastings, mon ami," Poirot said, pausing by a tall window overlooking the stables. "This case, it is like a tapestry, beautiful on the surface, but unravel one thread and the pattern changes. The horseshoe, it is too convenient, too neatly placed. But there is another clue, one that whispers the truth if we listen." Hastings frowned, his mind still on the blood-stained horseshoe. "You mean the footprint? It's small, but it could belong to anyone. A maid, perhaps, or Clara." Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "The footprint, yes, but it is not alone. Come, let us return to the stables. There is something I must see again." They crossed the lawn, the air sharp with the scent of damp grass and distant horses. The stables were quiet now, the constable having retreated to the manor, leaving only the soft snorts of the Diomedes horses to break the silence. Poirot knelt near the stall where Tom Ellis had been found, his gloved fingers brushing the straw. He paused, his eyes fixed on a small glinting object half buried in the dirt. "Regardez, Hastings," he said, carefully lifting a tiny silver button, its surface etched with a delicate floral design. They turned to Hastings, his expression thoughtful. "The button, it narrows our focus, but it is not enough. We must consider the timing. The scream at 9 o'clock, the open French doors, the footprint, and now this button. There is a sequence here, Hastings, a pattern of intention." Before Hastings could respond, a commotion in the hall drew their attention. Inspector Grayson stormed in, followed by a pale-faced Lionel Gray, whose hands were clenched into fists. "Monsieur Poirot," Grayson said, his voice tight with excitement, "we found something else." A letter in Gray's quarters addressed to Tom Ellis. It's threatening, plain as day. Gray's eyes flashed with anger. "It's not what you think. That letter's old, weeks old. Tom and I had a row, but I didn't kill him." Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but commanding. "Show me this letter, Inspector, if you please." Grayson produced a crumpled sheet of paper, its edges worn. The handwriting was sharp, angular, and unmistakably Gray's. It read, "Tom, you're meddling where you don't belong. Keep out of my business or you'll regret it." The note was dated 3 weeks prior. Poirot read it carefully, his eyes narrowing. "Monsieur Gray, explain this business you speak of." Gray's jaw tightened, but he spoke reluctantly. "Tom was poking into my dealings with a buyer. I've been negotiating to sell one of the Diomedes colts against Sir Reginald's wishes. Tom got wind of it and threatened to tell the master. We argued, but I never touched him." Poirot's gaze was unyielding. "And this buyer, who is he?" Gray hesitated, then muttered, "A man named Carver from London. Wealthy, but not the sort Sir Reginald would approve of. I needed the money." "Money," Poirot repeated softly, as though the word held a world of meaning. "Letter. It points to Gray, but it is too convenient. We must look to the silences, the things not said." Hastings nodded, his mind racing. You think someone's framing Gray? Not framing, perhaps, Poirot said, but guiding our attention. The killer, they are clever, but they cannot hide from Hercule Poirot. We must watch, we must listen, and we must find the thread that ties the button to the truth. As the clock struck 4, its chimes echoed through the library, a reminder that time was slipping away. The puzzle was growing clearer, but the killer remained a shadow, lurking just beyond Poirot's grasp. Chapter 7. More lies surface. The twilight cast a somber glow over Blackthorn Manor, its windows reflecting the fading light like watchful eyes. Inside, the library had become Hercule Poirot's temporary headquarters, its shelves of leather-bound volumes bearing witness to his relentless pursuit of truth. Captain Hastings sat in a corner, nursing a cup of tea that had long gone cold, his gaze fixed on Poirot, who was examining the silver button with the intensity of a jeweler appraising a rare gem. The detective's notebook lay open, filled with neat, precise annotations. Times, names, and cryptic phrases like "the open door" and "the shadow at 8:45. "Hastings, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice breaking the silence. "This button, it is a small thing, yet it speaks volumes. It is not merely a clue, but a confession of carelessness, or perhaps of intent. We must discover to whom it belongs, and why it was dropped in the stables after the police had searched before Hastings could reply. A sharp knock announced the arrival of Mrs. Dowling, the housekeeper, her face pale and her hands twisting nervously at her apron. "Monsieur Poirot, sir," she said, her voice trembling before the scream. "That's damning, Poirot. And the button, could it be hers?" "Possibly," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. "But we must not leap to conclusions. The mud, the button, the footprint, they suggest a woman, but we must verify. Let us speak with Lady Beatrice." They found her in the drawing room, seated by the fire, her delicate frame swathed in a shawl. Her eyes, red-rimmed, betrayed sleepless nights, and her fingers toyed nervously with her pearls. Poirot approached with his usual courtesy, bowing slightly before taking a seat opposite her. "Madame," he began, his voice soft, "I must ask you a delicate question. Last night, before the scream at 9 o'clock, were you perhaps outside, near the stables?" Lady Beatrice's hand froze, her pearls slipping from her fingers. "Outside? No, Monsieur Poirot, I was at dinner with the others. You heard us all say so." "Indeed," Poirot said, his tone unyielding but polite. "Yet there is a witness who saw you step onto the terrace at 10 minutes to 9. There was mud on your shoes, madame. Can you explain this?" Her face paled, and for a moment Hastings thought she might faint. Then, with a visible effort, she straightened. I did step out briefly. I felt faint during dinner. The room was so warm. I needed air. I walked to the terrace, but I swear I didn't go to the stables. I was back before the scream." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting, though his voice remained gentle. "And this mud on your shoes, madame? The terrace, it is stone, no? The mud, it comes from the lawn, perhaps, or closer to the stables." "I don't know," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't notice. I was only out a moment. Please, Monsieur Poirot. I had nothing to do with Tom's death." Poirot nodded, his expression inscrutable. "Thought it was just stable business, but now—" "Most interesting," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "And this conversation, where did it take place?" "In the stables, late one evening," Clara replied, I was out riding and overheard them as I returned my horse. Poirot nodded, filing the information away. Merci, mademoiselle. You have a sharp ear. Tell me, do you possess a dress with silver buttons, perhaps with a floral design? Clara's expression flickered, a mix of surprise and wariness. I might. Why do you ask? A small matter, Poirot said, waving a hand. We will speak again, I think. As Clara departed, Hastings turned to Poirot. She's quick to point fingers at Gray again. And that button, do you think it's hers? Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice low. But the button, it is a distraction as much as a clue. The real question is the timing. 8:45, the mud, the scream. Someone was in the stables before the murder, and they wished to remain unseen. Lady Beatrice, Clara, or another. And this deal with Carver. It adds a new thread to our tapestry. The clock in the hall struck 6, its chimes a solemn reminder of the passing hours. Poirot's eyes gleamed with determination. The lies, Hastings. They are piling up, but each one brings us closer to the truth. We must be patient, and we must be precise. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The evening shadows stretched long across Blackthorn Manor, their edges softened by the flicker of candlelight in the dining room. The household had gathered for dinner, though the meal was a somber affair, the clink of cutlery and the murmur of forced conversation barely masking the tension that hung like a storm cloud. Hercule Poirot, seated at the far end of the table, observed the scene with his usual meticulous care, his green eyes darting from face to face, cataloging every gesture, every faltering word. Captain Hastings tightening on his wineglass. Clara, that's enough. This is neither the time nor the place. Isn't it? Clara interrupted, her voice trembling with emotion. Tom was family to me, Uncle. He taught me to ride when I was a girl. He didn't deserve this, and I won't sit quietly while his killer walks free. Lady Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her throat, while Dr. Vance adjusted his spectacles, his expression unreadable. Lionel Gray, seated at the far end of the table, stared at his plate, his jaw clenched. Poirot, however, leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with interest. Mademoiselle Clara, he said, his voice calm but commanding. You speak with passion, and passion often reveals truth. What is it you know or suspect that you have not yet shared? Clara's gaze faltered, her defiance giving way to something softer, more vulnerable. She drew a shaky breath, her eyes glistening. I saw something, Monsieur Poirot. Not last night, but a few days ago. Tom was in the stables talking to someone, a man I didn't recognize. They were arguing, and Tom looked afraid. I didn't hear much, but I caught the name Carver. The same name I told you about. The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling like dust. Sir Reginald's face drained of color, and Lady Beatrice's hand trembled so violently that her wineglass tipped, spilling red across the pristine tablecloth. Carver, Sir Reginald said, his voice hoarse. What does that scoundrel have to do with this? Poirot's eyes narrowed, his fingers steepled. Monsieur, you know this man Carver? Sir Reginald hesitated, his gaze darting to his wife. He's a horse dealer from London. Shady sort, always sniffing around for a deal. I refuse to do business with him. Speak now. The truth. It cannot be hidden forever.
Lady Beatrice's lips parted, but no words came. She rose abruptly, murmuring an excuse about needing air, and fled the room. Sir Reginald started to follow, but Poirot raised a hand.
Let her go, monsieur,
he said.
She will speak when she is ready.
For now, we have a new piece of the puzzle. This man, Carver, and his connection to Tom Ellis. Dr. Vance cleared his throat, his voice measured. If I may, Monsieur Poirot, this Carver sounds like an outsider. Could he have been here last night? The stables are accessible from the woods. No one would have seen him come or go.
A possibility,
Poirot conceded.
but unlikely.
The scream, the open French doors, the footprint. They suggest someone within the household, someone who knew the routine of Blackthorn Manor. No, Dr. Vance. The killer is closer than you think. Gray, who had been silent, slammed his fist on the table, startling the group.
Enough of this. You're all looking at me, thinking I'm the one. I didn't kill Tom, and I don't know any Carver. If you want to find the truth, stop wasting time and look at the real secrets in this house.
His outburst hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. Poirot's eyes gleamed, as though Gray's anger had revealed more than intended.
Monsieur Gray,
He said calmly.
your passion, it is noted. But tell me, what are these real secrets you speak of?
Gray's face twisted, but he said nothing, rising and storming out of the room. The remaining guests sat in stunned silence, the weight of Clara's revelation and Gray's outburst pressing down on them. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low.
Mon ami, the crack, it has appeared. Clara's words, Lady Beatrice's fear, Gray's anger. They are threads pulling loose. Frame commanding the room with an authority that belied his stature. His mustache was impeccably groomed, his eyes bright with the quiet confidence of a man who held all the pieces of the puzzle. The guests, Sir Reginald, Lady Beatrice, Clara Haverford, Dr. Vance, and Lionel Gray, sat in a semicircle, their expressions a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Inspector Grayson, invited at Poirot's insistence, stood near the fireplace, his skepticism evident in his folded arms. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and measured. We are gathered to discuss the tragic death of Tom Ellis, a man struck down in the prime of his life. The police, they have their theories, and Monsieur Gray has borne the weight of suspicion. But Hercule Poirot, he does not accept the obvious. The truth, it lies in the details, and tonight we shall uncover it. A murmur rippled through the room. Lady Beatrice's hands trembled, her pearls clicking softly, while Clara's eyes narrowed, her posture alert. Gray's jaw tightened, his gaze fixed on Poirot with a mix of defiance and dread. Let us begin with the facts, Poirot continued, pacing slowly before the table. At 9 o'clock a scream was heard, and Tom Ellis was found dead in the stables, killed by a blow to the head. The weapon, a horseshoe, was discovered later, hidden poorly behind a bale of hay. A threatening letter from Monsieur Gray suggested motive, yet there are other clues. A silver button, a muddy footprint, and the curious matter of Lady Beatrice's absence from the dining room at 8:45. Lady Beatrice gasped, her face paling. Monsieur Poirot, I told you, I only stepped out for air. Oui, madame, Poirot said, raising a hand. But the mud on your shoes, it tells a different story. The terrace is stone, yet the stables, they are surrounded by earth. Letter speaks of threats. Lady Beatrice, whose shoes bear the mud of the stables. Or another, hiding in plain sight. Sir Reginald's voice cut through the tension. This is preposterous, Poirot. You're accusing my wife, my niece, everyone. What proof do you have? Proof, monsieur, lies in the contradictions, Poirot said, his voice rising slightly. Consider the scream at 9 o'clock. It was heard by all through the open French doors. But why a scream? If Tom was struck down suddenly, he would have no time to cry out. The scream, it was a signal, a distraction, meant to draw you all to the stables at the precise moment. Clara leaned forward, her voice sharp. A signal? You mean someone planned it? Précisément, Poirot said, turning to her. Someone ensured the household would rush to the stables, where Tom's body would be found. But the murder, it occurred earlier, perhaps at 8:45 when Lady Beatrice was seen on the terrace, when a small footprint was left in the mud, when a silver button fell from a dress. Lady Beatrice rose, her voice breaking. I can't bear this. I didn't kill Tom, but I saw something that night. I didn't want to say for fear of what it might mean. I saw Clara near the stables just before I stepped out. She was hurrying back to the house, and her dress. It was torn. Clara's face flushed with anger. Aunt Beatrice, how dare you? I was in the dining room all evening. You're mistaken, or lying. The room erupted in chaos, Sir Reginald shouting for order, Dr. Vance urging calm, and Gray muttering under his breath. Poirot raised his hands, his voice cutting through the din like a blade. Enough! The truth, it is close, but it requires one final push. I propose a test. Tonight, at 9 o'clock, we shall recreate heavy with anticipation. Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the table, his small frame radiating authority, his green eyes scanning the assembled company. Sir Reginald, Lady Beatrice, Clara Haverford, Dr. Vance, Lionel Gray, and Inspector Grayson, who lingered by the door with a skeptical frown. Captain Hastings stood near the French doors, which were ajar as they had been the night of the murder, letting in the cool night air. Poirot had orchestrated this reenactment with meticulous care, instructing each person to take their exact place from the night of Tom Ellis's death. The table was set as it had been, with plates of untouched food and glasses of claret, a mirror of the fatal evening. The tension was palpable, each guest's face a mask of unease, their eyes darting as though expecting a specter to emerge from the shadows. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and deliberate. Tonight we recreate the moment of the scream, the moment that led us to find poor Tom Ellis dead in the stables. But the scream, it was not the moment of his death. No, the murder occurred earlier, and the scream was a ruse, a distraction to draw you all to the scene. Hercule Poirot has seen through this deception, and now the truth will be revealed. A murmur rippled through the room, but Poirot raised a hand for silence. Let us begin with the facts. At 8:45, Lady Beatrice left the dining room briefly, seen by Mrs. Dowling. She returned with mud on her shoes, suggesting she ventured beyond the stone terrace. A small footprint was found in the stables, and a silver button, etched with a floral design, was discovered after the police search. A threatening letter pointed to Mr. Gray, and the name of a man, Carver, emerged as a shadow over this tragedy. But these are threads, and we must weave them into him, to beg him to keep silent. He knew about my debts to Carver. I'd borrowed money, foolishly, to cover losses from bad investments. Tom found out and threatened to tell Reginald. I couldn't bear the shame. The room gasped, Sir Reginald's face darkening with shock. Beatrice? Debts? Why didn't you tell me? I was afraid, she sobbed. I went to the stables to plead with Tom, but he was alive when I left, I swear it. Poirot nodded, his expression softening. I believe you, madame. You did not kill Tom Ellis. But your presence in the stables, it was known to another, someone who saw an opportunity. He turned to Clara, whose composure faltered for the first time. Mademoiselle Clara, you are clever, observant. You told us of Tom's argument with Carver and of Gray's threats. But you too were in the stables that night, were you not? The silver button, it is from your dress, a dress torn in your haste to return to the house. Clara's eyes widened, her voice sharp. That's absurd. I was at dinner, as I said. You have no proof. Poirot produced the silver button, holding it aloft. This button, it matches the one missing from your green evening gown, which I observed in your wardrobe this afternoon. And the footprint, it is the size of your shoe. You were in the stables, mademoiselle, and you screamed at 9 o'clock to ensure the body was found. Clara's face paled, but she shook her head. You're wrong, Monsieur Poirot. I didn't kill Tom. No, Poirot said, his voice softening. You did not. But you know who did, and you have protected them. He turned to Dr. Vance, whose calm facade had begun to crack, a bead of sweat on his brow. Docked bag, hidden poorly. Your prints are on it, and the blood matches Tom's. You underestimated Hercule Poirot. Monsieur Inspector Grayson stepped forward, his skepticism replaced by grim resolve. Dr. Vance, you're under arrest. As Vance was led away, Clara collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Lady Beatrice clung to Sir Reginald, who looked as though his world had shattered. Gray's shoulders sagged, relief mingling with exhaustion. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. The truth, mon ami, it is painful, but it is free. The little gray cells, they have done their work. The clock struck 9, its chimes echoing through the silent room, marking the end of Blackthorn Manor's darkest hour. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The morning after the dramatic revelation in Blackthorn Manor's dining room was subdued, the air heavy with the weight of truth unveiled. The mist that had clung to the Devon hills had lifted, revealing a crisp, clear sky. But within the manor the atmosphere remained somber. Hercule Poirot sat in the library, his small frame perched in a high-backed chair, his hands folded neatly over his notebook. Captain Hastings stood by the window, gazing out at the stables where the tragedy had unfolded, his mind still reeling from the events of the previous night. Dr. Vance had been taken into custody by Inspector Grayson, the farrier's hammer secured as evidence, its bloodied surface a silent testament to his guilt. Clara Haverford, her composure shattered by her confession, had retreated to her room, while Sir Reginald and Lady Beatrice grappled with the revelations of debts and secrets that had torn their household apart. Lionel Gray, exonerated but shaken, had returned to the stables, his brusque demeanor softened by the ordeal. Poirot closed his notebook with a deliberate snap, drawing "Piece it all together." Poirot smiled, stroking his mustache with a delicate touch. The little gray cells, mon ami. They see what others overlook. The scream at 9 o'clock, it was too precise, too convenient. A man struck down does not scream so loudly, nor does he wait 15 minutes to do so. It suggested a plan, a distraction. The footprint and the button, they pointed to a woman, but not as the killer, rather as a witness. Lady Beatrice's muddied shoes confirmed her presence, but her fear was of exposure, not guilt. Clara's torn dress and her knowledge of Carver connected her to the stables, but her love for Tom ruled out murder. He paused, his expression thoughtful. The letter from Monsieur Gray. It was a red herring, meant to mislead. But Dr. Vance, he was too calm, too detached. His medical bag, it held the true weapon. A farrier's hammer, not the horseshoe planted to implicate Gray. And when I saw the fear in Clara's eyes, I knew she protected someone. The rest, it was a matter of pressing the right nerve. Hastings shook his head, a wry smile tugging at his lips. You make it sound so simple, Poirot. But it's genius, really. You saw through all the lies. Not genius, Hastings, Poirot said, rising from his chair. It is method, observation, and the understanding of human nature. The truth, it is always there, waiting to be seen by those who look with care. He crossed to the window, gazing out at the stables where the Diomedes horses stood, their powerful forms a reminder of the wild beauty that had framed this tragedy. This manor, it is like the horses, magnificent but dangerous when unchecked. Tom Ellis, he was the steady hand, but even he could not tame the secrets of Black Sea. Justice served. Guard your horses and your secrets with greater care in the future.
With that, they stepped out into the crisp morning air, the manor's heavy doors closing behind them. The gravel crunched under their feet as they made their way to the waiting motor car, the Diomedes horses watching from their paddock, their eyes as enigmatic as the secrets they had witnessed. Hastings glanced back at Blackthorn Manor, its ivy-clad walls standing silent, and felt a pang of relief mixed with melancholy. Another case solved, Poirot, he said, climbing into the car. But it never gets easier, does it? Poirot settled beside him, his expression serene. No, mon ami, but it is the price of truth, and for that, Hercule Poirot will always pay. As the car pulled away, the manor receded into the distance, its shadows fading into the light of a new day. Chapter 12. The Echoes of Truth. The train to London rattled through the Devon countryside, its rhythmic clatter a soothing counterpoint to the turmoil left behind at Blackthorn Manor. Hercule Poirot sat by the window, his small, immaculate figure framed against the passing fields, his eyes fixed on the horizon with a contemplative air. Captain Hastings, seated opposite, fidgeted with his newspaper, unable to shake the lingering unease of the case. The revelation of Dr. Vance's guilt had brought justice, but the emotional scars it left on the Haverford household weighed heavily on his mind. Poirot, Hastings said, folding the newspaper, I can't help but feel for Clara. She loved Tom Ellis, and yet she was forced to protect his killer out of fear. It's a cruel twist. Poirot turned from the window, his green eyes softening. Oui, mon ami, it is a tragedy within a tragedy. Mademoiselle Clara, she is a woman of spirit, but her heart, it was caught in a trap not of her making. The fear of ruin, it can make even the strongest bend. But she is young, and time, it will heal. Hastings leaned forward, his voice low. And
Fragments. The scream at 9 o'clock. It was the first clue, a deliberate act, not a reaction to death. The footprint and the button, they pointed to a woman, but not as the killer. The letter from Mr. Gray, it was too convenient, meant to distract. And Dr. Vance, his calm, his detachment. It was the mask of a man hiding guilt. The hammer in his bag, it was the final proof, but it was the human heart that betrayed him. Hastings nodded, marveling at his friend's precision. You turned the dining room into a theater last night, Poirot. That reenactment, it forced Clara to break and Vance to falter. I've never seen anything like it. Poirot's smile widened, a rare glimpse of pride. The theater, mon ami, it is a tool of truth. The killer, they are always watching, waiting for a mistake. By recreating the moment, I gave them no choice but to react. Clara's tears, Vance's sweat, they were the cracks in the facade. The truth it cannot hide from Hercule Poirot. The train slowed as it approached a small station, the platform bustling with passengers. Poirot's gaze drifted to the window, his voice growing reflective. This case, Hastings, it reminds us of the fragility of trust. Tom Ellis, he was loyal, but he saw too much. Lady Beatrice, she hid her shame. Clara, she protected out of fear. And Vance, he betrayed for greed. Each choice, it ripples, like a stone in a pond. Hastings frowned, his thoughts turning to the Diomedes horses, their wild beauty a silent witness to the crime. Those horses, Poirot, they're at the heart of it all, aren't they? Their value, their legacy. It's what drove Vance to deal with Carver, what made Gray a suspect, what pushed Clara to act. Oui, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. The horses, they are a symbol of pride, of power, of untamed nature, of Hercule Poirot's pursuit of truth. Chapter 13. The Unseen Thread. The train's steady rhythm had lulled Captain Hastings into a reflective silence. But Hercule Poirot's mind remained as sharp as ever, his eyes occasionally flicking to the passing landscape as if it held secrets yet to be uncovered. The resolution of Tom Ellis's murder had brought justice to Blackthorn Manor, but Poirot's demeanor suggested an unfinished thread, a lingering question that refused to be tied off. Hastings, sensing his friend's unease, set aside his newspaper and leaned forward. "Poirot," he said, his voice low to avoid disturbing the other passengers. "You seem troubled. The case is solved, isn't it? Vance is in custody, and Clara's confession explained the scream. What's bothering you?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of deep thought. "Mon ami, you are correct. The murderer, he is caught. Dr. Vance's guilt is beyond doubt, confirmed by the hammer, the blood, and his own faltering under pressure. Yet there is a thread, a small detail that nags at the little gray cells. The name of Carver, this horse dealer from London, it appears and vanishes like a shadow. Why was he not here? Why did Tom Ellis fear him? And what did Clara truly know?" Hastings frowned, his brow furrowing. "You think there's more to Carver's role?" Clara said she overheard Tom arguing with him days before the murder. Could he have been involved? Poirot's eyes gleamed, his fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. "Précisément, Hastings. Carver is the unseen thread, the figure who looms over this tragedy yet remains absent. Tom Ellis argued with him about payment due, and Dr. Vance dealt with him to falsify reports. Lady Beatrice owed him debts. This man, he is a catalyst, yet he was not in the stables that night. Why then does his name weave through every secret? Her debts to Carver, she admitted to them. Could she know more about his dealings?" Poirot nodded, his expression grave. "Lady Beatrice, she is a woman of secrets, but not of courage. Her fear, it was genuine. But it was fear of exposure, not of murder. She went to the stables to plead with Tom, but she did not strike him. Yet her debts, they connect to Carver, and Carver connects to Vance. The thread, it runs through them all." Hastings leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think Carver orchestrated the murder from afar? Paid Vance to do it, perhaps? Poirot's eyes narrowed. It is possible, but unlikely. Carver, he is a man of profit, not of violence. His role, I suspect, is that of the puppet master, pulling strings from a distance. But the act of murder, it was personal, driven by Vance's fear of exposure. No, Hastings, the key lies in what Tom Ellis knew, a secret so dangerous that it cost him his life. The compartment fell silent, the only sound the clatter of the train and the distant murmur of other passengers. Poirot opened his notebook, his pen poised. But instead of writing, he stared at the page, his mind clearly elsewhere. We must consider the stables themselves, he said at last. The Diomedes horses, they are the heart of this mystery. Their value, their legacy, it is what drew Carver, what tempted Vance, what drove Gray to defiance. Tom Ellis, he was their guardian, and he died protecting something. But what? Hastings's thoughts drifted to the black stallion, Diomedes, its wild eyes and restless energy. Could it be about one specific horse? The colt Gray wanted to sell, perhaps? Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice low. Or perhaps it is not the horse itself, but what shadow of Carver. The London air was thick with the scent of coal smoke and the clamor of city life, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings stepped off the train at Paddington Station. The bustle of porters and passengers did little to distract Poirot, whose mind was fixed on the elusive figure of Carver, the horse dealer whose name had woven itself through the tragedy at Blackthorn Manor. Hastings, carrying their small valises, glanced at his friend, noting the determined set of Poirot's jaw and the faint gleam in his green eyes. Poirot, Hastings said as they navigated the crowded platform. You're certain this Carver is worth pursuing? Vance confessed. The hammer was found and Clara's story tied up the loose ends. What more is there to uncover? Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his unyielding focus. Mon ami, the case of Tom Ellis's murder, it is solved, oui. Dr. Vance, he is the killer, and justice will be served. But Carver, he is the unseen hand, the shadow that casts doubt on the completeness of our tapestry. Why did Tom fear him? Why did Lady Beatrice borrow from him? And what did Clara withhold? These questions, they nag at the little gray cells. They hailed a taxi, directing the driver to a discreet office in Soho, where Poirot's contacts had traced one Mr. Julian Carver, a man known in equine circles for his sharp dealings and questionable ethics. The office, tucked above a tobacconist's shop, was cramped and dimly lit, its walls lined with faded photographs of racehorses and certificates of dubious authenticity. Carver, a wiry man with a slick mustache and calculating eyes, greeted them with a guarded smile, his hands folded on a cluttered desk. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, Carver said, his voice smooth but edged with wariness. I've heard of your reputation, sir. To what do I owe the pleasure? Poirot settled into a chair, his posture impeccable. Died. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, but you also dealt with Dr. Vance, who falsified veterinary reports for you, and with Lady Beatrice, who owed you debts. These connections, they are not coincidence. Monsieur Carver's face paled, but he maintained his composure. Lady Beatrice? She borrowed money, yes, but that's her affair. As for Vance, he certified a few horses, standard practice in the trade. You're fishing, Monsieur Poirot, and I've done nothing illegal. Poirot's fingers steepled, his voice soft but unrelenting. Illegal, perhaps not, but unethical, most certainly. Tom Ellis, he discovered your scheme. a plan to pass off a flawed Diomedes colt as sound, to inflate its value. This colt, it carries a hidden defect, does it not? A weakness in the bloodline that would ruin the Haverford reputation if exposed. Carver's eyes widened, a flicker of panic betraying him. That's nonsense. The Diomedes horses are flawless. You've no proof. No, Poirot said, producing a folded paper from his pocket, a copy of a veterinary report obtained through discreet inquiries. This report, it was altered by Dr. Vance to conceal a hereditary lameness in the colt. Tom Ellis found the original, and he confronted you. You pressured Vance to silence him, and when that failed, you relied on his fear to drive him to murder. Carver's hands clenched, his voice rising. I didn't tell Vance to kill anyone. If he acted, it was his own doing. I'm a businessman, not a murderer. Poirot's gaze was unyielding. You may not have struck the blow, monsieur, but you set the stage. Your greed, your threats, they pushed Vance to desperation. And Clara Haverford, she overheard your argument with Tom. She knew of the colt's defect, and she protected Vance to shield her family's name. Hastings, until tamed by reason. Carver's greed set this tragedy in motion, but it was Vance's weakness that struck the fatal blow, and Clara, she bore the weight of love and loyalty, a burden heavier than any crime. The taxi carried them toward their lodgings, the city lights a stark contrast to the quiet shadows of Blackthorn Manor. Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet satisfaction, but Hastings knew his friend would not rest long. Another puzzle, another thread, would soon call to the little gray cells. Chapter 15. The Final Thread. The London morning was crisp, the streets alive with the hum of early activity, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings sat in a quiet tea-room near Baker Street. The clink of porcelain and the murmur of conversation provided a gentle backdrop to their discussion, a stark contrast to the dark revelations of Blackthorn Manor and the confrontation with Julian Carver. Poirot sipped his tisane, his eyes distant but sharp, while Hastings, ever the loyal companion, stirred his tea absently, his mind still tethered to the case. Poirot, Hastings said, setting down his spoon. You've tied up every loose end, haven't you? Vance is in custody. Carver's scheme is exposed, and Clara's motives are clear. Yet you seem unsatisfied. Is there something more? Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. Mon ami, you know me well. The case, it is solved, oui. Dr. Vance, he struck the fatal blow, and Carver, he wove the web of greed that led to murder. But there is one final thread, a question of the heart that lingers. Why did Mademoiselle Clara, a woman of such spirit, choose silence over justice for so long? Her love for Tom Ellis, it was true. Yet her loyalty to Blackthorn Manor, it bound her. This, Hastings, is the human puzzle that fascinates Hercule Poirot. Poirot's thoroughness growing. And Carver? Will he face justice? Mais oui, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. His confession, it has been passed to the authorities. His dealings, they may not be murder, but they are fraud. The law, it will deal with him. As for Blackthorn Manor, it will heal, though the scars remain. Clara, she will carry her grief, but she is strong. Lady Beatrice and Sir Reginald, they will rebuild their trust. Brick by brick, Hastings smiled, a touch of melancholy in his expression. You've done it again, Poirot. Have a Lucic, you've not only solved the crime, but uncovered the heart of it, the motives, the fears, the loves that drove it all. Poirot waved a hand, his modesty genuine but tinged with pride. It is not I, Hastings, but the little gray cells. They see the pattern, the order beneath the chaos. The murder of Tom Ellis. It was a crime of greed and fear, but also of love misplaced. Clara loved Tom, yet she loved her family's honor more. It is the tragedy that lingers. He rose, adjusting his coat with his usual precision. Come, mon ami. London. It is full of life, of new puzzles waiting to be solved. But for now, let us take a walk, breathe the air, and let the shadows of Blackthorn Manor fade. They stepped into the bustling street, the city's energy enveloping them. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose small figure moved with purpose, his eyes already scanning the world for the next mystery. The case of the Diomedes horses was closed, its secrets laid bare. But Hastings knew that for Poirot, the pursuit of truth was never truly over. As they walked toward Regent's Park, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the city. Blackthorn Manor was a memory now, its dark stables and wild horses a chapter in Poirot's endless book of justice. The final thread